Today, I have four of my amazing colleagues who are here to discuss virtual events, whether that's teaching in a virtual or hybrid environment, whether that's going to a conference, and how we can increase engagement and improve the experience for our participants. With me are Bjorn and Lynn and Jean and Michelle, and I'm so excited to hear from all of them and their experiences. Let's start with Bjorn. What are some strategies or techniques that you found useful for hybrid or virtual experiences to increase engagement and the user experience?
Well, I'm down here in Georgia, and Georgia's football country. And UGA football coach Kirby Smart says you got to make the main thing the main thing. And I think that is very true when we get to the virtual environments. That an emphasis on emphasis, if we're going to keep the doubling going here, and that the more we can focus on what people really need to know and really emphasize that and really bring that to life, because so much of this virtual presenting, it flattens the human experience of communication. And so finding a way to really emphasize and bring to life the main things and really drill down and focus and bring those things to life. So Kirby Smart would be proud of me for making the main thing the main thing. And I think that's what I've been trying to do more and more as I present online and talk to people presenting online is focusing on bringing emphasis to the most important points.
Excellent. I love it. And when you are teaching at Georgia, is it a hybrid environment where some students are in front of you and some students are joining remotely, or is it largely remote?
We have what I would call the Cheesecake Factory menu of options for teaching styles. There's probably 6 to 200 versions of this. I would say most people, even though there's a number of classes that are supposed to be face-to-face, this year it was even face-to-face classes were probably primarily folks joining via Zoom, but there will be a big push in the near future for things to be even more face-to-face. Because of just a clamor from some students and then just a desire to kind of check in on people's mental health and try to make college again.
Nice. And if you do have students who are still joining remotely because of their comfort level with in-person or because of health conditions or other considerations, what will you do to manage that in-person versus virtual? Because one of the people who I follow, Ray Ringel, on facilitating meetings and events and workshops, she always says, don't try to avoid whenever possible having some people virtual and some people in person, because the people who are virtual are always going to be second-class citizens. What are you doing to help prevent that from happening, the second-class citizenry?
I've been trying to have some of the group work be across the two platforms. So I'll have, instead of just pairing up the people online with the people online and the folks who are in person, have them talk to each other there. I try to go across platforms if at all possible. And I know that might seem like it's crazy and only adding more hiccups technologically, but if folks can bring laptops to class, I'm trying to have them connect that way as a way to kind of bring the folks into the room, so to speak. I think the other thing too is and this is something I need to do a much better job on next semester, is demanding professionalism from the students who are virtual, demanding them to perform as if they were there. It's really devolved in my classes. I have people that when their video turns on, they're clearly still in bed. I didn't know that I was going to have to put up a sign on my classroom that was going to say no shirt, no shoes, no service, because there are students. It's crazy the degree to which people have gotten very comfortable with being on Zoom, too comfortable perhaps. And I think that's a way to kind of bring them back into the in-person experiences. Ask yourself, would you appear that way? Would you perform that way if you were in class? And I think the answer is, in most cases, no. And so I need to turn that ship around at the beginning of next semester.
I love that idea of asking people in person to use the technology to connect with the online participants. I think that's a really savvy idea. And I think we're all getting really much more comfortable. And as long as you have the internet and the infrastructure to support it, it seems like a really great way to help prevent the virtual participants from being second class. I love that. Lynn, what are some of the things that you are doing or experiencing in the virtual environment? Tell us about your experiences and what recommendations you have.
It's been a major shift for me because previously, since the program I teach is a capstone program, and it basically is running a newsroom, and it's very spontaneous. So I walk around and see what their stories they're working on, or if there is a group of people who's having this particular issue trying to get at a certain storyline, I may just stop in the middle of class and talk to them about that situation. Well, moving totally virtually, and it had to be all or nothing. We had to have everybody doing virtual. You couldn't split it. I had to be much more intentional about what I wanted to convey and what I wanted to teach in each day's session before they went out to start working on their individual reporting. And that meant working with my adjuncts and otherwise to say, what is it that we want to accomplish this day and this week? That also meant that we had to be specific about what issues they covered. Instead of letting them figure it out for themselves, we gave them assignments. That's not the way news works, really, but it did provide a certain structure so that we could be more intentional about what we wanted them to take away. Um, Another thing I had to get used to is having more visuals. That is, again, not my style. Generally, I stand in the middle of a newsroom, I stand in the middle of a classroom and say, okay, so what's going on, and talk to them that way. Now I have to put things on a screen, even if it's just for blips. Not exactly like a PowerPoint. Because it is a broadcast class, I could use little clips of video, but I think anybody can do that one way or another if you can find video that you can use with appropriate licensing. But that does break it up because we all know that the Zoom fatigue is tremendous. And what Nora was saying about having students show up to class like it is really showing up to class. There are sometimes concerns about people and their bandwidth and whether they can have their video on all the time. But think about how you're presenting yourself to everyone all the time. And that's not just the person who's running the class, but to the other people who are viewing your class. That helps me help them when they're going to be presenting or doing an interview with somebody else. If I have standards for you, I want you to take those standards out into the larger community in terms of other types of interaction you'll have virtually or otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I really appreciate those perspectives. And I do also think that visuals can be a really helpful way to make sure that the virtual experience is more engaging. And I know that in past panel discussions we've had that Jean has mentioned one of the great things about working in Zoom or another video conference platform is that it's oftentimes easier to integrate the videos and the visuals than you might if you were at a workshop or conference or teaching in an in-person setting. So it is a nice way to use the technology that we have available to us with our virtual work. So thank you for the ideas. Jean, what are you doing? I know that you have a lot of different areas. So you're coaching for Spoken with Authority online, you are teaching at George Washington online, and you have the Capital Speakers class, which is adult learners. So what are you doing to build rapport and to make this a really robust experience for the folks that you teach in these various ways?
Yeah, I think it comes down to three things, and I've been focusing a lot on engagement, personalization, and accessibility. And so in terms of engagement, what I've found with my classes is just mixing it up. And so using video and things like that to spark discussion, but also things like using the whiteboard. When you want them to just respond, and everyone will respond because it can be anonymous. So as we kicked off a unit on public communication, I asked them, put down who you see as some of the greatest public speakers. And immediately the board starts filling with, Obama and, who was the other one that came up right away? Martin Luther King. And it was interesting because finally someone put a woman in there. And I said, oh, see, now we have women being recognized. And so they could kind of see how their thoughts evolved, and we could draw some things out on that. So I found that that's been really useful. And then I think personalizing is important. And sometimes we feel like we have to be sharing our screen the whole time, and that takes away from that ability for us to see the participants, for the participants in the right setting to see each other. Of course, it's all dependent on the number of people you have, the nature of the occasion. But I did find in one coaching workshop that I did with a group of about 12 women, they commented later on how interesting it was that I didn't share slides the whole time, that they had never even thought of that as a possibility, and how it let them really feel present with each other in that moment. So I would say, don't hesitate to go back and forth. Slides, stop sharing, talk about some stuff, pull slides up again, stop, that you can do that. And that those little pauses that feel awkward when you're making that transition is really just fine. And then the third thing is about accessibility. And one of the tools that I hadn't used before that I've started using a lot now is Google Slides. And so uploading my slides into Google Slides, and then when you go into present mode, you just click on captions and you get the captions automatically. It doesn't caption what other people say. If there's discussion, it only captures your own voice. But that's been a nice tool that increases accessibility a little bit.
That's amazing, Jean. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because since we are in a virtual and mediated format, we should be using it as another opportunity to include people, not only making it easier with technology and sharing slides and videos, but hey, including people who are hard of hearing or who are visually impaired or whatever reason that people might need accessibility. So thanks for reminding us about the importance of that, among other things. And Michelle, tell us about what your experiences are in the virtual environment and how we can make the experience better.
I'd be glad to. So I have 4 R's for you, Christine. They are reducing cognitive load, reflection, recapping, and the last is a bit unconventional, which is rest. Okay. So let's start with reducing cognitive load. We have to make sure that we use those facial expressions, hand gestures, all of those behaviors add to the message. Images, pictures, and the more we do the work, the less our audience and our listener has to work. And so if they stay engaged, then they like what's going on. If they like what's going on, social emotional learning is taking place. If social emotional learning is taking place, then we can add a new skill set on top of that. So that's what I say about reducing cognitive load. Also, recapping. As Bjorn has said, keep the main thing the main thing. And sometimes we have to say it a few times. I know before we hit the record button, Bjorn talked about the lawnmower in the background. And those are the traditional distractions that we are mindful that we're competing against. But we're also competing against internal distractions, boredom, fatigue, whatever other life events are playing in your head. So recapping consistently so that our listeners and our audience walk away with whatever value we're there to present is very important. And as Jean has talked about personalization, reflection is very important. We're one of our favorite topics. So people like to learn about themselves. And I think that most mature professionals know the overlap between professional growth and personal development. So to give people opportunities to think about themselves, assess themselves, develop tips that they're going to go forward with, that reflection, and also making listeners in this virtual environment also be stakeholders in their own learning is very important. And lastly, the unconventional tip I talked about is rest. Now, it's a documented, well-researched fact that what we learn is concretized by the amount of and quality of sleep we get that night. So you want to remind your listeners to sleep on it so it'll stick. So those are my points.
Thank you, Michelle. I love the 4 R's. Thank you so much. I would add, in terms of things that I think are a good idea for improving the experience for participants of virtual events or virtual learning, would be to supplement in 2 ways. I like to supplement with the amount of facilitators and with fun things. And in terms of facilitators, it's really helpful to have more than one person who is doing the program. And Michelle and I have done a couple virtual events where we have facilitated and we're both online and they're entirely virtual events. And it's helpful because, again, people see her face and they hear her voice and they get a new visual. And then when I do my portions of the program, it's just another way to reset. So I think it's a good idea to have co-facilitators when possible. And it's really useful to help manage the questions. When one person's speaking, the other person can deal with questions or any IT issues. So I'm a big fan of co-facilitators, and at Spoken with Authority, we have not done one single in-person learning event since last March. But I do think and hope that they will start happening sooner than later. I really hope that we do round the corner on COVID in the new year. And when that happens, one of the things that I would like to do is to make sure that we carry this idea of co-facilitation forward, so we can have someone who is in person as the facilitator and someone who is online as the facilitator, and they are going back and forth leading, but also engaging the people who are online and in person. And Bjorn, I love that idea of crossing the two. So when there's breakout groups or ways to engage, to make sure that we're crossing and bridging those two universes of people. And then the other thing about fun things is, when we have Spoken with Authority or working with our clients, we oftentimes will text them on the way to the meeting and say, hey, can I grab you your favorite coffee at Starbucks on the way? And we will do that because it's just a really nice white glove touch, and it helps build rapport, and it helps make people really look forward to the sessions with us. And that's something that I think that we need to think about for our virtual events. And for example, I am attending the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities conference that is going on in over several weeks right now. And one of the things they did on the opening day of the conference is they sent every attendee a $5 gift card to go get a coffee. And they provided a couple different vendors so that you can select which one you wanted. It was a really small thing, but I really appreciated it. I've also received little packages of gifts or things that I can do as part of the conference to participate. So sometimes they'll have, the wine tasting or the painting or whatever the event is, or chocolate tasting, and they'll send you those things in the mail so that you can engage in a virtual event and have some of those fun things that you have in a conference or learning experience that you would get in person. So I would encourage people to think about, what are some ways that I could do a really send a book in the mail or give a gift card for a coffee, just to help build that rapport and make that experience a little bit more special and memorable, which it doesn't have to be in person to be special and memorable. We just have to be a little bit more creative about how we do it and deliver it. It's been really fantastic to speak with the amazing members of my team, Bjorn, Lynn, Jean, and Michelle, about how we can make the virtual experience more robust and better for participants. Thank you so much for your insights and for being part of the Spoken with Authority team.